If you think you could never be vegan, you're in the right place. And if you think there's something big that you'd really like to do, but it's probably too late, you're in the right place. My name's Michelle Olander. I think there has never been a more important time, never been more reasons to move in a vegan direction. So I'm here every week to cheer you on and show you how to veg your best. Episode 152, For Fork's Sake, with author Rachael Brown. Hello, my veg your bestie. Hello. First day of August. At least when this episode comes out, August 1, 2023. And you know, August is not typically my favorite month. All the things I thought I had all summer to accomplish, well, actually that mental construct is tick-tocking, rapidly disappearing. I'm starting to panic when I look at the list of things I wanted to do this summer. Now, the days are still long, but if you're someone who spends a lot of time looking at the sun, the days are getting noticeably shorter. Now, I used to go crazy when my dad would say that years ago, but here I am doing the same thing. And then there are the weeds. The weeds in my garden are at their worst in August, and I've said it before, geek alert. August was known as the weed month as far back as the 8th century, probably earlier, and I won't try and pronounce it in Old English, but it was written down by the Venerable Bede, the Anglo-Saxon chronicler and scholar. How about that? The weed month. And the weeds are intense in my garden right now, and it's hot, and it's buggy to try and deal with them. But that's neither here nor there, just a glimpse of my to-do list for this month. The podcast always comes out, but sometimes those weeds don't get dealt with. Now, back to what we're here for. If there's anything I have tried to get across over 152 consecutive weekly episodes, it's that limiting and eliminating the consumption of animal products looks a little different for everyone. And everyone comes to the decision to move in that direction in a slightly different way. There are different precipitating ideas and crises and issues for everyone, though they tend to fall in 3 basic camps. Door one that they come through, ethics and compassion. Door number 2, more and more, this is the door. People are compelled by environmental reasons. And door number 3, health. And now I personally don't care what door anyone enters through. Whatever reason gets them to break through all the cultural conditioning and make different choices, make positive choices, because it doesn't matter whatever the precipitating event is, I think it's win, win, win. Now today's guest is Rachael Brown, and she has entered this space through the health door. Rachael's helping people see the value for themselves and their families of a whole food, plant-based diet. Rachael Brown is the author of a book that came out last fall, For Fork's Sake. For Fork's Sake, a 10-day guide to healthier, happier eating. Rachael also has her plant-based nutrition certificate from the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies at Cornell, a great program I also went through. And her story is fascinating. After being diagnosed with high cholesterol in her 20s, Rachael discovered the China study and started exploring the science behind a whole food, plant-based diet. And after just a couple weeks of eating that way, her cholesterol dropped, and you're going to hear all about that. This discovery sparked Rachael's journey with her family away from the standard American diet to a whole food, plant-based, and yes, no oil lifestyle. And in her book, For Fork's Sake, as well as in today's interview, Rachael's going to share her family's transition story, as well as very practical tips and tricks to simplify that science behind the way of eating. You can easily get it on her website, but you'll get more today's interview and in her book, a complete 10-day plan to help readers kickstart healthier, happier eating for themselves and for their families. And I think you're going to hear that Rachael's approach is realistic. You do not need to move to an ashram. She knows changing your diet can feel drastic, but it doesn't have to be drastic. Her goal is to empower you, to empower others to make a transition at their own pace. And at her website, you'll see you can sign up for a free guide for inexpensive, easy plant-based substitutions. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just talk to Rachael. Rachael Brown, author of For Fork's Sake. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad you are, because we have a lot to talk about. You are a new author, which is awesome. And I totally, all I want to do is just applaud you all day for having finished that and got it out into the world. That's amazing. That's amazing. Let's talk about a little bit about your process of writing the book before we finish today. But mostly, I love the title, For Fork's Sake, in case anybody with children is listening and thinks I said something different. It's FORK sake. And you've written a great book about how we can, maybe even in 10 days, go from a sad diet, the standard American diet, to a happy one, which is, why don't you tell me what HAPPY stands for?
Sure. Healthy and plant-powered, yay. You know, whole food, plant-based, no oil doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. So I thought the sad to happy was a little bit easier to grasp.
That's great. I think that's very good, because I think a lot of us do know that acronym now, SAD, Standard American Diet. So tell me, let's start with a little bit about I've read your book, and I'd like to know, maybe our listeners like to know a little bit more about what got you to HAPPY.
Yeah, I grew up eating what I thought was a pretty healthy diet, a healthy standard American diet. My mom was mostly vegetarian, so we had some fish and some meat, but we always had a big veggie garden and had vegetables and fruit with every meal. But I had high cholesterol in my early 20s, and I was very active, always in sports, big hiker, rock climber, cyclist. And so it was concerning. And also my dad had been on high cholesterol medication as long as I could remember. And he would have these odd side effects, like lose his taste or something like that, and have to go on a new medication. So I knew I didn't want to go on medication. So I would, my doctors would say, cut back on cheese and eggs, and I would do that. And then my cholesterol would creep right back up. So that was concerning. And then in my late 20s, my nephew was diagnosed with cancer. He was 5 years old at the time, and his mom was in nursing school, and she had a professor who asked her if she looked at the role of nutrition in cancer. And they had their own hobby farm. She had taught me how to pull mozzarella cheese the summer before. They had chickens, we had chickens, they had all kinds of animals, also a big garden, but they changed their diet literally overnight. And she suggested I read the China study. And I read that book, and honestly, I was angry at the end of it, because nobody had told me this life-changing information. And that really started us on our journey. We watched Forks Over Knives, and then we decided, my husband and I, our kids were 6 and 8, so young family, let's try this for 10 days. So we cut out the animal products, we cut out the oil, we even cut out coffee. And now I'm not sure why we did that because that made it more difficult. But we got our blood work, and we changed the way we were eating for 10 days. And I couldn't get back in for my second blood draw for 17 days. But when I went in, my doctor said, I don't know what you did, but whatever you do, keep doing it, because your cholesterol dropped 50 points. And I couldn't do that with medication. So that was both good news and bad news. The good news was this really worked. Changing just what we were putting in our mouths changed our blood work. But the bad news was, with kids 6 and 8, like, this was going to be a whole new way of living and eating. And I didn't want to spend all my time in the kitchen, and I didn't want to spend a ton of money, buying new foods and all of that. So that was really what started it all for us.
And so now you have a way of helping us maybe mimic in a small way your 10-day plan. And I see that you recommend also for if there are strong health reasons why someone is looking for it, to begin with a blood draw. And you talk about how we can help ourselves see if it matters. So often people try without actual data for health things. And then they're like, well, I don't know. And then they talk to their doctor and the doctor's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what you're doing or what you did or when it started. Right. So I think that's very interesting. And I also hear this all the time, Rachel, doctors saying, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it, rather than actually asking what it is you did. I hear that all
Sadly,
the time.
Yes, it's true. Maybe they don't want to hear what's working. I'm not sure. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Yes, I suggest giving this a solid go for 10 days. And with that blood work, you can really get a sense for what's going on, because, you can't feel your cholesterol dropping. I mean, I felt amazing after that 10 days or 17 days, but I didn't know my cholesterol had dropped, so that blood work, that lipid panel will really give you some information that will back up how you're feeling. Conversely too, in the first 3 days, you might not be feeling great if you're giving up, high salt, high sugar, high fat foods that your brain is telling you, oh, I'm really missing. But getting that data back will be able to tell you like, oh yeah, that's something you'll get past. Actually, really amazing things are happening. So yeah, I had to put a disclaimer in my book too at the beginning, because if somebody's on medication for diabetes or blood pressure, in as little as 2 days, they might need to reduce their medication or sometimes get off it. So your body really heals so quickly when you give it everything it needs and take away really what it doesn't need.
Well, I mean, I think it's always worth trying, especially, but if you are on medication, such a good reminder to all of us not to do this out of the blue. If you are taking beta blockers or cholesterol medications, yeah, we want to make sure that someone is there to react if we're having a reaction. A big and what are those typical symptoms? Would be things like faintness.
Yeah, mostly lightheadedness. Yeah.
So you saw it quickly. You also talk about how the first couple of days might be uncomfortable if you're suddenly not using food to enjoy your life with things like high fat, high sugar, high salt. The other good thing about that 10 days or doing a kind of a crash course like this is it does give your taste buds a chance to actually respond and kind of enjoy a real whole food, which I think sometimes if we do it more gradually, our taste buds don't get that kind of shock to go, oh, that's an orange. Oh, wow.
Yes, it's so true. I didn't know until doing research for this that literally our taste buds change every 2 weeks. We have all new taste buds. So yeah, that's part of the magic of giving it a solid go for 10 days or 2 weeks, because you literally have new taste buds to work with. And you will experience things like my son did, eating a red pepper and going, oh my gosh, this is so sweet. Where did you get this? And it was no different than the red pepper I always buy the same red peppers, but they tasted so different. And yeah, after getting off that hyper sweetened, hyper palatable food, things like a normal peach in the summer will just blow your mind and your taste buds. It's so sweet. So yes, it really is. It's not that you can't gradually, work your way into eating a vegan diet or a plant-based diet, but you really will notice the benefits so much quicker if you jump in for a 10-day, say, or a 2-week start, because things will happen so much faster for you that it might just help you in the long run.
My podcast is called Vedge Your Best, because I do agree that a jump start, a 10-day, a veganuary, a 30-day, I do think these things are probably, I don't know, better, best, faster. But then I find so many of my clients will go, yeah, but I have a wedding to go to, or no, I'm on vacation. I'm on this, I'm on that. So we'll do this next week, next season, after the kids are back in school. So tell me how you encourage people to use that 10-day program, even if they actually do have real lives going on right now.
Yeah, so true. And it's a great point, because real life does happen, right? So I suggest give it a go for the 10 days and then learn how to keep moving forward in what you're doing. So I don't talk about this being a diet. I talk about it more being a lifestyle, because diets are things we start and then we stop. We start them, we get healthy or lose some weight, and then we gain it all back or go back to our old ways of being. So this is really a new way of living, a new way of being in the world. So after that 10 days, you'll probably feel amazing. You might be sleeping better, feeling better, digestion be feeling better, all these amazing benefits. And you'll want to take that forward in your life. And then there are tricks and tips to learn to employ, right? Like how to eat out at a restaurant that maybe doesn't have vegan selections, or how to attend a wedding or a dinner where foods you aren't going to be choosing to eat normally now are available. There's some things to try later on, but if you give yourself that start, I think you'll really have more of the impetus to stay with it. And like you said, then after that 10 days, if you think, okay, I'm going to pick one thing a week or something, I'm just going to start my day with a glass of warm lemon water, or I'm going to try and add greens to every meal, this week. Picking some of those small actionable steps can be huge and create long-term change as well.
So what is something you have noticed when people are trying to do your 10-day plan, your sad to happy plan in 10 days? What do you notice that people are doing that you want to caution them about? What is something, I'm sure, because what I find is even for myself, I interpret, oh, they said that, but they don't really mean that. So where do you see people doing their own spin on what you're saying?
Yeah, the funniest thing, a lot of people will come because they're dealing with high cholesterol or they have some markers for heart disease. So a lot of people are looking to lose some excess weight. And I think the biggest one is that I tell people you shouldn't be hungry eating this way. And most people think they need to be restricting their calories. And that's just not the case. Eating this way, one of my favorite things about eating this way is that you can eat all this wonderful, amazing food and you can eat to satiety, to fullness. And you might be eating almost double the amount volume-wise that you used to be eating. But that's really hard for some people to, especially people who have worked at trying to lose weight or restrict calories. It's a whole new way of thinking that you can have a bowl of soup, and if you're still hungry, have another bowl of soup, and maybe 2 hours later, have another bowl of soup. You literally can keep eating because it's this whole thing about calorie density. That one piece of pepperoni pizza has a lot more calories than a few bowls of soup and maybe a healthy burrito, and a salad. So you can eat more probably than you're used to eating. And at the same time, excess weight will just be shedding. You won't even have to be thinking about counting calories or macros or micros or vitamins or minerals, any of that.
So we are instructed to make sure we take care of our B12, right?
Yep. That's the one supplement really that anybody who's not eating animal products needs. And that comes from bacteria in the soil, right? So we aren't eating soil on our plants and our veggies anymore. The only reason we need it from the animals is because when they still eat greens and grass and all of that stuff, they're getting enough of that. So we can just cut out the middleman and take a vitamin B12. Depending on where you live, some people might suggest vitamin D as well. But I tend to go with Dr. McDougall, get outside every day. Try to be out in the sunshine if you can for 15 to 20 minutes to get that vitamin D naturally.
Yeah, and that's something we don't have to be plant-based or vegan to be low on B12 or vitamin D. That's something that, right, especially people my age and older, I'm about to turn 64. Apparently a lot of us are low in B12, even if we are eating animal products. So real important.
Yeah. I would assume, and I don't know, but I would assume that's just because 97% of Americans aren't eating enough vegetables, right? And only half of us are eating enough fruit. So, it does kind of make sense with what we're eating as a population.
So your recommendations also are to limit or no oil.
Yes.
So tell us everything.
Yeah, this can be a tricky one for people. My mom was one of the biggest people in the beginning, like the Mediterranean diet is so healthy. That's a big one that people always bring up. And yes, I would say the Mediterranean diet is more healthy than the standard American diet, but that's primarily because they eat more vegetables, legumes, whole grains. It's not because of the fish and the olive oil, it's despite those things that the Mediterranean diet can be a healthier option. For the easiest explanation, I say the same reason we don't want to be eating oils, this is the same reason we don't pour oil or bacon grease down our drains, right? We all know that clogs drains. And basically the same thing happens in our body. So oil is 100% fat. And I don't know a lot of people who are looking to just eat 100% fat. Even if you're trying to gain weight, there's healthier ways to be eating that. If you're trying to gain weight, add more avocados and nuts and seeds and tofu. But that oil, that 100%, olive oil, let's say a tablespoon is the oil from 50 olives. So all of the nutrients and fiber and antioxidant, all that stuff has been stripped away and you're just left with the fat. If you want that olive oil, you like olives, then eat olives. Most people don't sit down and eat 50 olives, but you can. That's just fine. But usually, you might sit down and have 8 or 12 or 15 olives, but your body uses that whole olive very differently than if you're just having oil. So oil is inflammatory in our bodies. And as we're learning and knowing more about what inflammation does in our bodies, we know we don't want to have inflammation. So it's not as hard as it sounds. On my website, I've got a free printable, downloadable thing that is a guide to cooking and baking without oil. And it's really quite simple. You can just swap out vegetable broth or water if you're sauteing. You can still air fry, if you like French fries and that kind of stuff. You can bake things in the oven or air fry things. And if you're baking, the simplest swap is to just use an applesauce instead of a vegetable oil. So it's not as hard as people think. And it's one of the things a lot of people who have a hard time, who've changed their diet or eating more healthy, it's not until they actually give up the oil that they notice the most difference in how they're feeling and how their joints are feeling. A lot of people with arthritis notice a big difference after cutting out dairy. Secondary to that, I think, is oil. So I would just offer that people give it a try and see how they feel.
We believe you, and we want to do that. And now we are visiting a friend or we are going out to eat. How would you help us ask for that in another kitchen when it's not our own kitchen?
Good question. I've run the gamut here. I have called ahead and said, I have these dietary restrictions. My doctor has advised me to not have this, and that can work for somebody who wants to take that route. Christopher Carnrick, an amazing chef, he's printed out little cards that have a note on there to hand to the wait person, that can hand to the chef, that say, here I have heart disease and here are the things that I can't have. And a lot of people working in a kitchen appreciate that. I've mostly accepted that if I'm going out to a restaurant, that I'm going to have some oil in my food. I have tried many times and asked. A lot of places can't really wrap their head around cooking without oil. And so sometimes that's a big ask. So, I mostly don't worry about this if I'm eating out. I don't keep oil in my house. We don't cook anything with oil here. And so I mostly just think if I'm going out, I accept there's going to be a little bit of oil in the foods. I'm not going to worry about it then. But for those who are being really careful, call ahead and ask, or scour the menu and see what you can find that maybe is prepared ahead of time without oil. You can maybe get a baked potato or some grains that don't have oil added. The other thing I do add is that I say if things are going to be drizzled, oftentimes items are drizzled with olive oil. I just say, can I have no extra oil added, please? And that does help.
Yeah, for sure. I always ask that because I do see that on so many. It looks so lovely, you know. It's
Yes.
just a little bit of glistening anointment, I think, as Jamie Oliver used to call it.
Uh-huh. Yep.
So, and I do think that's a great idea to have something written on hand. I think that's great for all of us. But if we are really trying to get our cholesterol down, I think that's great because very often I find chefs are fine and I find wait staff are fine, but they don't always communicate that well together. And I think sometimes wait staff are scared of the chef.
Yes, it's true.
And so to hand them something saying this is our client out in the dining room, I think that's a great thing. So there's not a miscommunication. That's awesome. Love that idea. And I think we should all consider doing that in some way. I've just been traveling quite a bit this spring, and I know the Vegan Society and others have lists in different languages. I think you can download on their site when you go to Italy or China or Japan, especially countries where you don't have any familiarity with the language. And such a relief to just know, well, I did my very level best. I handed it to them in their own language. So I think that's a great idea. Rachel, now talk about in terms of your own family, your own social milieu. I read in your book, I think I told you it made me laugh, where you said, okay, what's next? No television, no laughter. So, what was the reaction you got from your loved ones?
It's been varied. Some people jumped on board when they learned new information, and were really excited to try new things. And other people really dug their heels into what they were doing. It's a very personal thing what we eat. And I didn't realize this in the beginning. When we learned all this information and we experienced this incredible change and feeling so good, our numbers changing, all of that, we wanted to tell everybody we knew. And we quickly realized that if we wanted to have friends, we should probably change our methods because it can be tricky. But, my dad is in the early stages of Alzheimer's. His father had Alzheimer's. And they've made some significant changes, which has been very helpful. My father-in-law is in year 3 of brain cancer. They weren't able to get his entire tumor, but they changed their diet very strictly. I mean, they're more strict than we are. They won't eat oil, out. And he hasn't had any growth in his tumor. And this is a Montana cowboy who used to cut the fat off his steak to eat it. So it was a huge change, but they've had amazing benefits from this. So I've really seen that when people are open to trying it, and whether that's, we bring some food to share and they try it and they go, oh, this is as bad as I thought, or, they have a brownie and go, wow, that was a sweet potato brownie. I didn't know, I couldn't tell. Whether it's that route or they experience benefits themselves, usually people will jump on board, maybe not entirely or for a long period of time, but for the most part, they're accommodating, which is nice. And for friends that aren't, we just offer to bring, some people want to keep eating what they're eating, and that's okay too. We're not out to change everybody's mind if they're not open to something, but we've just found it easiest to say, we'll bring something to share. And we've learned to double what we bring, because often if it's a gathering of people, our food will be gone before we get to it, because people want to try delicious food that is, beautiful, has all these colors in it. If we're adding a lot of fruits and vegetables, which we usually are, it looks palatable, and then they taste it and they really enjoy it. So offering some options for people to try is really helpful, and just being a gracious guest. When we started, we didn't say like, we're never going to eat this. If we go to somebody's house and they prepare us whatever, we will eat it. We will be a good guest. But we were really shocked at how amazing our friends and family were when they knew we were doing this. Many of them would say, well, can you give me a recipe what should I make? And they wanted to try. So that was really really nice to have that. And we've just continued that experience. And many friends and family have transitioned to eating this way 100%. So it makes it really easy to get together, which is a fun benefit.
Well, it sounds like you have a very evolved group of family and friends. I think that's so fun because
Not
I
everybody
have
is
some
on board.
clients who often feel like I am the only person, and they feel very not just restricted, but they feel very punished. I'm the
Yes.
only person who has to eat this way. And I always think, well, first of all, you don't have to eat this way. You're choosing to because you think there's some value to yourself. But we are so, I think, conditioned that food is friends and love and it should be easy. And we have a lot of rules that we've rightly or wrongly developed around foods. So remind us again how we can well, what I love about your book is there's so many notes, so many citations of actual science. So how do we help remember this when we're feeling a little bit like I'm the only one who has to eat this way?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think for myself and for people I consult with, I think honestly, having those reminders and whatever works for you, whether it's reading, picking a book every month to read, watching documentaries, now after COVID, there's so many online organizations. If you don't have an organization or a club or a pod near you, you can hop online. Whole Communities is one through the Center for Nutrition Studies. It's a worldwide organization. There's thousands of people on there, but you can hop on and join other people who are trying to do this. And you can feel like you're part of a community because you're right. Oftentimes we are the lone person in the room, trying to eat this way. And yeah, sometimes people aren't open to having any conversation or they don't even want to hear why you're doing it, right? Like they might ask a question, but they really are just looking to tell you why you're wrong or why paleo is the best thing or whatever. So, choosing your battles too is a big one. So, kind of shoring yourself up with resources and learning new information. Like I said, reading books, watching documentaries, those have been some of the most helpful things to feel like you're not in this alone when maybe, at the moment you might be the only person in the room doing this, but that there are people out there. There's a wider community of people who are waking up to the facts about how we're eating and what it's doing to the planet and to our health.
That's a good reminder. I always say that my mentors in my vegan journey were podcasts. So many podcasts that I listened to, and I had previously listened to a lot of cooking podcasts and food history podcasts. And at one point, when I was kicking this around, I was like, "Yeah, but I don't want to be listening to the history of animal products and foods. I understand that's our history, our traditions." I want to crowd that out. And I started looking for some, and boy, it makes such a difference when you start crowding out just the way we can, Dr. Greger, who you mention often,
Yes.
He says, crowd out the animal products with plants. You can also crowd out the kind of normalizing voices about how we have maybe eaten traditionally. I think we could argue that most of us didn't have 500 years ago access to this amount of fat, cheese, meat,
right?
This kind of meat. But anyway, I think that's so great. Let's look for ways that we can feel a little more connected when we're making decisions that still feel a little bit hard. Now, do you find it hard now, ever?
I really don't because I just the benefits outweigh any struggle. I've experienced that. We're 13 years in. My kids are now 19 and 21. They're away at different states at colleges, and they eat this way because they choose to. And, to me, watching that process of having young kids who were, in school, middle school was tough. It just I kind of think we're all big middle schoolers as adults. Sometimes we deal with the same thing, wanting to fit in or not wanting to stand out. But, as time has gone on and as we reap all the benefits of eating this way, of living this way, I wouldn't trade it. So, everyone once in a while, a salty chip looks really good. But for the most part, these days, tempting things that used to be really tempting aren't that tempting anymore. So yeah, I think anybody can do it. It's really some of the ideas that people have as to why they can't do it. those just really probably aren't true if they give it a go. A lot of the things that people say to me, like, well, I don't have extra money to do this. It's going to be more expensive. I need to live near Whole Foods and I don't have one nearby. It's just not true. You're going to actually save money doing this. Once you get rid of the meat and the cheese and the sour cream and ice cream and oil, those are the most expensive things in your grocery cart. So you can fill your grocery cart with all these other grains, fruits, legumes, even cashews or macadamia nuts, expensive nuts that you probably didn't used to buy. And you'll still come out ahead. So things like that, things like, well, I don't have the time to do this, it's not going to take you any more time than what you're already doing. So kind of getting over some of those initial hurdles really help in the long term to keep you on track.
Yeah. And I all new things take up a little extra bandwidth because we have dialed in, we have been feeding ourselves for years, decades, whatever. And we know exactly how to feed ourselves. Now, it might not be great, but we've figured it out. And so now we're supposed to put the brakes on, read a label, maybe, try a different preparation. That's, it does take a little more bandwidth.
You're right.
So I'm actually telling you that I agree with you, and you just need a little time sometimes to get, and it sounds so much more daunting than it is. And I agree with you. If you're starting to feel better or even just see some blood work change in 10 days or 2 weeks, that hopefully is enough to give you a little bit more encouragement to keep with it.
Yes. And I should clarify, you're right. In the beginning, like you said, all new things have a learning curve, right? So yes, you'll need to carve out a little extra time to look up some new recipes or to spend a little extra time in the early days, when you're shopping to learn to read labels and all of that. But quickly, those things will become second nature. And once you start doing things like batch cooking, learning some of these tricks and tips that make eating really easy, I would argue that in the long run, you'll be saving yourself some time and energy. But yes, give yourself a little time. I mean, think of it as a new hobby or something new that you're deciding to embark on. Yeah. And it's an exciting thing rather than a daunting thing.
Well, now back to your kids, because I think so many people say, yeah, I could probably get my husband on board, but there's no way my kids are ever going to put up with this. So your kids, you have raised them up to college age now. What has been helpful for them? Because they've obviously been in lots of situations where the food that was around them was not whole food, plant-based, or definitely not low oil. So what was helpful to them in staying with that?
Yeah, well, I would say the number one thing was the benefits they noticed, right? Because you're right, they were often in more of, more tempting situations even than my husband and I, because, when you're at school, at the lunch cafeteria, after school, hanging out with friends, all of that primarily involves a whole lot of junk food or processed foods. But once they felt better, it was easier to say, no, I really won't feel good if I eat that food. So, I'll bring my own. Or they would have some, and then they would be reminded through their stomach or through acne or whatever. And they would go, oh yeah, I just don't want to do this. And a funny thing started happening. Those junior high years are rough, eating differently and being made fun of and all of that. But then in high school, something switched, and their friends who'd been watching, all of a sudden it was like a cool thing to do. And they would ask like, well, what is that? Can I try some, and several of their friends have made the switch as well. So, I think that's part of that, giving it a solid go, really noticing the benefits. It makes it a little bit easier than to say no to the temptations. We also did some things in the beginning, like we had enzymes. So if they were going to a birthday party where it was going to be, cheese pizza and cake, that we would say, well, do you want to take an enzyme later doing the certification for the plant-based nutrition, I did research on that, and they really don't do that much. They're probably more of a placebo, but I tell a story of my son. I dropped him off one time. I said, do you want to take an enzyme so your stomach doesn't hurt if you eat pizza at this pizza party? And he said, no, because if I have one piece, that's it. I'll just eat that. But if I take an enzyme, then I'll think I can eat more. So I'll just, and I was blown away because I didn't have that kind of reserve, or I wasn't that strong. So kids are amazingly resilient. And the other thing with kids is they don't have as much time in, they don't have as much emotional connection, I think, to food as many adults, So when they learn something, when they see that cartoon video of the orangutan who doesn't have a habitat anymore because the palm oil has been, we need palm oil. And so they're raising the habitat of the orangutan to grow palm oil. When they see that, something in them really changes. And it's much easier, it seems like, for kids than to say, well, then forget it. No, I'm not going to eat that. And they do a really good job at sticking with things for personal reasons, where adults, I think we have a little more of the taste still that can outweigh that common sense or override that new information. But we all can do better when we learn more.
I think that's so true. And I think also when we fail at something, when something doesn't go that well, I think it's such a value. A lot of us will go, oh, forget it. I dropped the ball. I failed. You talk about this in your book a little bit too, but there's so much to be learned from a failure. Maybe when you're in this situation, you need more. So you're at your mother-in-law's house, or you're with friends, or you're traveling. Where is it hard? Then we can always make a plan for that. Or you can even kick it down the road a bit and go, you know what? In that case, I'm not going to be as conscientious on my either ethical choices or my health choices in this situation because I don't have that figured out yet. And I think you talk about, you were so changed by the China study. Your book is kind of a China study light. It's like a little bit like we have the kind of the highlights, but we have it kind of comes into our house a little bit more, how we can actually function with it. I'm guessing that was your hope.
It was, honestly, because I kept handing out the China study to people, going, oh my gosh, read this book. And half the people or more would hand it back to me and go, well, thank you, but no, I don't have time to read that.
I don't need a doorstop.
Exactly. So my goal in writing it was to write the book that I wish I would have had 13 years ago when we started out. And in talking and working with young families, many of them said, I don't have time to read books anymore, or I just read blogs or listen to podcasts or whatever. So my idea was to make it as short and sweet and easily digestible, pun intended, as could be, so that there was the why and the how, but really in a snippet kind of form, so that I do hope that people will go back and read the China study and read all these seminal works. But for many people who maybe wouldn't have picked up a book otherwise, I'm hoping that this will be that first step in. And yeah, the audiobook is 4 hours long, so it's a really quick and simple read, but I'm hoping to give people just what they need to get going.
And let's say the title of it again, For Fork's Sake.
Yep, For Fork's Sake.
I looked to see whether you had an audio book because I was reading it fast, and then I was like, "Oh, that'll take actually longer for me to listen to it now." So, but I love audiobooks. I love it. And did you read it? Because I didn't get a chance to listen to it.
I did. Yeah.
Now, so tell me about that. Was that fun or was that horrible?
Initially I thought, there's no way. I don't like hearing my voice on an answering machine, but as I talked with the sound engineer, people said, it's really more fun. It's fun to hear your own work in your own voice. And I have to say, it was a lot more enjoyable than I thought. So I ended up having a really great time doing it. And I'm glad I recorded it.
So did you I'm just curious, did you go to a studio or did you do it in your home?
I went to a studio. This was, second year of COVID. So I had all the information to make one of my closets a sound thing. And I just thought, I don't want to do that. I'm not real techie. So there was a sound engineer up the road. And then I had somebody in Colorado that put it all together. So it's possible to do this all spread out and all of that.
So I prefer when the author does the reading. I think
Yeah.
that's so much better. It's almost never, unless someone has really a hard time doing it. It's always better, I think. Now, so
Yeah.
you were recently at the Vegan Women's Summit in Brooklyn, New York. That's where I learned a little bit more about you, because I wasn't there, but my colleague Nancy was there, who takes care of all the back end stuff here in my coaching. Tell me, what did you learn? What was great? What are you looking forward to for the next one? What will you go to another one? Tell me everything.
Yeah, it was wonderful meeting Nancy. She was terrific. This was my first Vegan Women's Summit, and it was really fascinating, I would say. I mean, first of all, very exciting that there were over 1,100 people. It wasn't all women. My husband attended. There were many men there, but it's so exciting that there are that many people excited and energized, really, to learn more and to spread information, and so many entrepreneurs. Really, I didn't realize how many entrepreneurs were going to be there. All these, burgeoning businesses, and everything from this boots, rather than plastic boots instead of leather, to plant-based honey, and then everything in between, cheeses and meats and oysters and sushi grade tuna. I mean, so there were all these very interesting products. And that really, I think that was the hardest part for me, honestly, was thinking about, at the end of the second day, I was really just wanting a salad with some vegetables, because we had all these foods to try, but they were primarily fake meats, or fake cheeses. And I understand that we're trying to help people who might not otherwise, go straight to a salad or a veggie hummus sandwich. But I have a hard time, having worked with people now for a few years in this space, with some of these transition foods, because sometimes people use them in the beginning, but then that beginning becomes the norm and they never transition away from these foods. So I understand that for the planet, for the animals, yes, 100%, these meat alternatives, cheese alternatives are fantastic. But from the health standpoint, I don't see them being a long-term solution. So that was just interesting to notice. I do hope that schools would move from a chicken sandwich or chicken nuggets to a plant-based chicken nugget or chicken sandwich. But then I hope they would move to a black bean burger, or something else that would provide not only benefit to the planet, but to kids' health and all of our health as well. So, but fantastic speakers, fantastic people doing amazing work in the spaces that they're in. So really fun to meet some women lifestyle medicine doctors who are changing their practices in ways that are really unheard of. People are really wanting to help others make changes. And so it was really fun just to get to meet people who are busy doing that. The mayor of New York, Eric Adams, and his assistant Rachael, they're doing terrific things. They've gone to no animal products in meals twice a week in New York City schools. They've introduced healthy food, plant-based food, as the number one option in hospitals, in New York City hospitals. So if you have surgery and you come out, your first option for a meal is a plant-based meal. Your second option for a meal is also a plant-based meal. And if you still want meat or cheese, that would be your third option, and you can pay extra for that. So this is just amazing, amazing work, really, and making such a big difference in so many people's lives. So really fun to get to meet with some like-minded individuals.
Well, I hope to be there next year. I just was triple booked this year. And so I missed my college reunion, my 40th college reunion, and the Vegan Women's Summit. But anyway, I totally agree with you. There is a lot of fun food coming out of the vegan and plant-based movement. And it's not the food I want to be spending my time with. And very often, that's my only argument with Happy Cow, is when I go on Happy Cow to look for vegan options, I get deluged with like cafes and bakeries and donuts. And I'm like, no,
Yes.
I just want somewhere where I can eat like vegetables.
Right, right. Well, and I told my husband, the second day when I just wanted a salad, I was like, why can't there just be fruits and vegetables? And he's like, that would be a farmer's market. And there's not multi-million dollar businesses, startups for farmers markets, and that's the whole thing. Like, we're going to have to work within this system and figure out how we can make this work and how we can spread this news. Because if it's just going to be more expensive products or plant kind of food products, ultra processed products, then we're not going to really help ourselves sustainably, I don't think. So we're going to have to find ways to bring more of that into this space, I think.
That's a good point. And it's also why sometimes people think that being vegan, being plant-based is going to be more expensive for them. Because it's not just another opportunity to sell people packaged things. So I think this is I think the long range, the tension in the community is going to be sustainable and healthy and ethical. I'm just glad we've got this perfect storm of it coming from every angle. So and money's behind it. So we'll have to try to funnel that money into the right things, like farmers market, like big broccoli, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of the women on a panel, she was from Impossible Foods, and she was saying, as more companies come into this space, they started with an ingredient list of 17 or 19 ingredients, right? And then somebody came out with a 7 ingredient product. And so she said, we had to do our work and get down to that. So, it's not that it's not possible. It's what we're going to be demanding and what we're going to be asking. And, back to that oil thing that nobody wants to do. A lot of these products have so much oil. There's so much unhealth in these products, and they're really not food products. So, the more consumers demand healthy things that taste good, we know we can make them because we can make them in our homes. It's not that far of a stretch to have some of these items in the grocery store that are good for the planet, good for animals, and good for us. So we just need to continue to demand it with what we're choosing to purchase.
Now, for Fork's Sake, the book also has some recipes. It's not, I wouldn't call it in general a cookbook, but there are some good standard recipes. Why don't you tell us like 1 or 2 of them before we close up, so people can be like, oh, I need to learn how to make that.
Yeah, sure. So Jeff Novick, a wonderful dietitian who actually worked in some big food stuff before transitioning himself, he said I could use his longevity soup recipe, which is one of the easiest and best things I think I can recommend for people. It can be a meal, it can be an hors d'oeuvre, it can be, a dessert, really. I mean, you can make a big pot of this soup for, 8-year-olds can make it. I mean, it's not hard to make. It's really great for you. And that's a super recipe to just put in your rotation and to have on hand. For kids, if you have kids in your life, or if you yourself love desserts, I've got a peanut butter ball recipe. And it doesn't have to be peanut butter. It can be any nut butter that you enjoy. But that's great for athletes. We'll freeze them and stick them in a bag to take on a long bike ride. Those can be wonderful as well. And then macaroni and not cheese, that was a big one too. And also not just for kids, you can make this like a veggie bake, and it's terrific. People of all ages really love it. So yeah, there are just a few recipes to get you going in the book, and then on my website I have a few more. There's so many amazing cookbooks out there these days with just mind-blowing plant-based recipes, as well as, Google. You can type in, whole food, plant-based, no oil, lemon meringue pie, and you'll have thousands of recipes pop up, if not millions these days. So it's got a few to get you going.
That's great. That's great. So I'm going to respect your time and let you go, but we're all going to be looking for Fork's Sake, the book by Rachael Brown. And your website is also forforksake.com, right?
Book.com. Yeah, forforksakebook.com.
Book.com. Well, all the links will be in the show notes. And I really appreciate you having kind of distilled so much of this big science and the big issues into something so readable and something so shareable. And thank you for being on Veg Your Best, Rachael.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So, what did you think of Rachael? I mean, I think Rachel's enthusiasm is obvious, right? In person and definitely in her book, For Fork's Sake, Rachael breaks down the science behind the whole foods plant-based diet into easy, actionable steps for families, right? Real families who are made up of people. I don't know about your family. My family is made up with people with a variety of different, not just tastes and interests, but priorities, what they need from food. There are times in your life when you just need to fuel yourself. There are times in your life when you really want to enjoy food. There's different times, and we need to navigate all these when we're working with our families and trying to get them to eat something a little healthier, a little more whole, and low oil. Now, sometimes I know that some of us in this plant-based vegan community can come across, well, kind of as drill sergeants, suck it up, buttercup, change everything about the way you eat today. But Rachel's approach, I think, is very supportive, and I like the way she wants you to know that dietary changes don't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be all or nothing today. And small steps can lead to big, big, big changes over time. And for goodness sake, if you think that the whole food plant-based lifestyle is no fun, I know some of you say that. I know you do. You should check out the videos on Rachel's Instagram. Her Instagram page is also called For Fork's Sake Book. And Rachael shares a recent trip, just very, very recent trip to France. She was cycling and eating and cycling, and the photos are gorgeous. So be sure to check out Rachel's Instagram, For Fork's Sake Book, and also her website, which is called forforksakebook.com, and sign up for that free plant-based substitution guide to get more information on her personalized coaching. And of course, all the links are always in the show notes. Okay, my Veg Your Bestie, thanks for being here. Stay cool. Unless you're down in the other hemisphere, stay cozy. And I'll see you next week. But until then, veg your best. Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.